Hello, good evening or good afternoon, depending on where you are. This is Founder Laerun with the Fantasy Grounds Academy. Today I'm going to be working on a map that is going to be included in an adventure I'm designing, which is called the Oracle of Three. Today I'm going to tackle the Mothman Encounter forest scene here. This is a really colorful Fey map that's been designed by Mopsy. He's one of our community members. One of my favorite maps, very colorful. Got some pastels in there. Won't take a whole lot of line of sight. I'm just going to be basically doing the mushroom caps, maybe some of these outlying trees, maybe adding a little bit of water. I mean, there's really not a lot to do on this map because I don't want to cover a lot of it because it's a really cool map. So that's what I'm going to do today is I'm going to tackle this map and get the line of sight, the grid going, and show you some of the tools and techniques if you haven't ever used the Fantasy Grounds Map-tools. So I'm going to get started here. I want to switch my view here over to the actual Fantasy Grounds background, so we're not looking at the entire screen. So that is basically display capture. That's turned off, and now we'll go straight to Fantasy Grounds. And what we have here is this colorful map. It's pretty good size. It's not too huge. It's one of the things we preach when we do the classes is, you don't want the maps to be too large. So too large is too large dimensionally and also too large file size. So it's not too bad. The other thing is when you have a map like this and you're zoomed in, you're going to be moving all over. I mean, you're going to have to move the map a lot. So keeping the maps to a smaller size helps with that. It keeps the annoyance down, especially for the game master. Another thing you can do is in your settings under options, you can change the turn auto center map, turn that off. And what that'll do is make it so that when your players are on the map and your NPCs, the map won't jump around. And that's what that does is it'll center on the next combatant in the combat tracker. And if that annoys you or you want to keep it centered, you don't want it moving, just turn that off. It's independent of anybody else, so if you do this, it doesn't affect the players unless they want to do it too. They can change their own. But that's a really helpful tip if you have your map all set up. Like say you have it up here in this corner, and when you are trying to play, it will try to recenter on you, and that could be very annoying. And then you can also right-click on the map and click Zoom to Fill, which will fill up the entire window. And you can even turn the drop-down tools off if you want. That's what I have right there. And then you also have for Zoom to Fit, which will fit in this area. The other thing you can do is kind of squeeze in the map borders to accommodate the size of the map. So this is pretty much the size of the map without shrinking it or anything like that. So it's a pretty good sized map. And this is probably about the maximum you want to go. I asked Mopsy to do these like 2000 by 2000, I think. So I could go a little bigger without distorting, but I kind of wanted to keep it down too in file size. So this is basically a encounter that the players will have when they go through the Wildwood. Some of the sections of the Wildwood are highly mutated. And this is one of those areas. I'm going to call this the Mothman Encounter because this is where later in the adventure where Antila and the adventurers come across this, I guess he's like a moth hybrid, kind of humanoid moth-looking individual. He's hanging out underneath this tree, and he's in a cocoon. He's partially getting ready to metamorphose into like a moth, and almost like a butterfly. And it kind of has the Alice in Wonderland feel to it, and also the kind of the high fantasy kind of make-believe type stuff. But basically they come there and he tells them a little bit more about his relationship with the forest and how you have to be willing and accepting of change. And one of the things that Antila is struggling with within herself is the fact that she's going to be changing soon. Right now she's kind of an adolescent teenager type, kind of rebellious. She still has her wings, and once her wings fall off, she'll start metamorphosing into like a queen. and she'll have her own hive or her own colony. So she kind of wants to avoid that. She wants to be like the humans, like the adventurers. She actually falls in love or has like a crush on one of the players, and then or a really advanced like friendship where she wants to hang out with you all the time. But she basically she doesn't want to accept her fate, and the metamorphosis that's taking place here with the Mothman is reflective of how you will change and be reinvent yourself, so to speak. And he's kind of going through that change, and he's letting them know that he's kind of at the mercy of nature. And this area is not very safe because the bee folk come here and they collect water, and they also pollinate the flowers in the area. But he wisely chose this area because since they visit this area quite often, it kind of affords him a protection. So they patrol the area. They're always flying overhead, and once in a while they'll drop down and they'll get supplies. So while the players are in this area, there's a potential encounter that could even be a combat. But if the players role play well and they, do their due diligence, they can avoid combat and they can actually hide from the bee folk patrol. And all the while, this Mothman will be talking to them and giving them wise words and telling him about the past of the Wildwood, like what it was like before the Fae influence. And he will also divulge the fact that the bee folk were once a different race of humanoids. And in this case, the bee folk were elves. And then the ant folk and Tila's people were dwarves, basically. And over time, the corruption or the changes that were put on them are basically come from the Fey magic and the Wildwood itself. So they're anyway. So the adventure is, I don't want to give away everything, but the adventure is basically about change and accepting things, and it deals with number 3 a lot, so that's why it's called the Oracle of 3. So they say it comes in threes, that sort of thing. So it has a lot of indirect synchronicities and such. So covers love and war and all kinds of stuff. So there's all kinds of elements that I'm putting into the adventure, and they're very subtle, so they would be still suitable for younger players. So I'm gonna start thinking about what I'm gonna do first. And one of the things you want to do when you first get a map is take a look at what you have. So I got these mushroom caps. There's all these bushes, which I don't think I'm gonna put line of sight on them because they look nice, and I don't want to cover those. So I'll probably just cover the mushroom caps and some of those outlying shrubs and bushes. And as you can see, the artist has already placed a shadow in here, so I'm going to follow that direction of that shadow. So when we get to the ambient lighting, I'll show you how to handle that. So if you have a map that already has shadowing in it that's going a certain direction, just move the ambient light shadowing to match that. So whenever you get a map like this, the first thing you want to do is to put a grid on it. We unlock the map, and then we will go into the line of sight tool. And then I'm going to use the terrain. And at the moment, I have the selection tool. I'm going to go to probably the line tool. I'll just could use the Ellipse Tool. Kind of makes a perfect. I don't know if I'm just going to go to each one of these and just kind of make a rough pass around the edge. And you don't want to go to the very edge, maybe like just on this upper part here. That way, when players are on the map and they'll see what the detail is, they won't see the tops of these covered. So let's first we got to put the grid on. So I know Mopsy made these either 50 by 50 or 100 by 100. So it's important to know the scale. But if you go to the grid tool, we can turn on the visibility. And as you can see, this is a little bit small. I mean, you could use that, but I think it's a little bit small. I don't think that's the scale I was looking for. So let's go with, let's try 60, see how that looks. So 60 is a lot more doable, and it certainly makes the map pretty large. And then if you wanted to go to 100, that might be more feasible because you don't want a big cluster of squares all over the place, but at the same time, you don't want, little itty bitty things. So I think that's a pretty good scale. 100 by 100 is probably what you created it at. So that's important to know that. So if you are using a map and it already has a grid on it, you're kind of stuck. But if you find maps that don't have grids on them, you can kind of judge the scale that you need by looking at surrounding objects. So I imagine that each one of these mushroom caps is at least 10 to 12 feet tall. So that would lend itself to making these, roughly 10 feet wide at least. So that might be something. Or I can go with 75. That might even be nicer. Yeah, 75 is a good round number in there. So that's right in the pocket of 100 and then 50. So that's a sweet spot right there. I'm thinking in overall usage and how the players are going to travel, because I don't want them to blow right through this area. But at the same time, I don't want it so huge where I have to keep scrolling around. So that there's a balance there that you need to meet when you're creating maps or when you're importing them. How large are they, and how long is it going to take for the players to travel through here? So if a player can move roughly 5 or 6 squares, it's going to take them, a few turns to get through. So at least one turn. So that's something you want to consider. And then the other thing is, having the room to move around. So if these things are too big, you kind of cut yourself off with being able to walk around these things. Or if it's too small, it takes too long to go around it. So you got to kind of make a good balance and know what you want, basically, when going into this. So that's a suggestion. You don't have to do that. So once you have this on here, I'm going to change the color or the tint of the actual grid, because right now it's kind of washed out and gray. I don't really care for that. So I'm going to go with a bright yellow kind of color. So I'm going to go to tint, and I'm just going to click somewhere in the yellow area, and there is the tint change, and then you can increase the opacity or decrease, I think right about in there. So I want to still see the grid, but I don't want it to be too obnoxious. I think that's a good happy medium. Now you can see all the rest of where the grid is, but it is still kind of blends in with the background, so it's not too crazy. So that's an important thing also, is the aesthetics of what the map looks like. And once you have that on there, the more I look at this, the more I realize that maybe I should go with, 100 or something like that. So you'll have to make that decision in the beginning. Because once you set the grid, that's pretty much where everything's going to go off of. So make sure you set the grid first and decide on your scale. Because once you do that, you don't want to do a bunch of work and then decide you want the scale to go up or down. That would not be good. Okay, once you have this in place and you have your grid, you lock the layer. And then we're going to go in with the wall tool, as we discussed before, the line of sight, and go to the terrain tool. This is a little Christmas tree. And then I'm just going to click on the line tool. So I'm going to go through these little areas that I feel needs it, and I'm just going to click, kind of just casually click around. I'm not really following any specific contour. And when you are done making your points, double click, and that'll get you out of the drawing tool, or hit escape. If you continue, you'll start drawing more lines, so you got to be careful with that. So I'm just going to click here, there, just kind of make this, well, it will produce a little bit of shadow, but it's not going to be overwhelming where I can't see anything. And that's the same with this. I'm just going to come around the periphery, because I don't want to lose all that detail. I mean, Mopsy spent some time on these maps. I want people to be able to see them. When you cover them up with line of sight and shadow and all that kind of stuff, it's almost like, almost for nothing. So careful on how much you cover up. So I'm just kind of going through and systematically just taking these points and plotting them. And I don't even think I really have to adjust them, because once they're placed, and if I don't get too close to the edge, it will look really good once I get the line of sight active. So I'm just going to go through all these different areas that I want to put line of sight. And in this case, it's an occluder for just terrain. So it's really not a permanent, wall or anything. If someone wants to climb on top of these, they can. So that's kind of what we're doing, is we're blocking the light. And when they get close enough or they climb up on top, you can open it up and it will allow light to pass through and they'll be able to see on top. So that's kind of a cool feature that you can do. So I'm just going to come through here and just really casually go through. No stress, no anger, no frustration. I've been there, done that. Just really supposed to be casual. You just want to have fun and take your time. And I'm not in any stress to run a campaign or anything. This is something I'm building for myself and for the community. I really want it to look good, and I don't want to get too stressed out. I do intend on selling it potentially, but I'm not going to let money get in the way of fun. So definitely want to make sure that this is a labor of love and not something you're forced to do. That's what really makes this hobby difficult to stick with, because you're wanting to rush through things. That's not how this stuff works. So once you have a line, like say I just started this, you can hit the shift key and that will keep the line straight. So if you want to have a straight line, you hold the shift key and it'll go in 45-degree angle or 90 degrees. So I'm just going to come out to about here. And then I'm just going to just casually just click around in this little corner here. And it's really not even have to be straight on that edge. I mean, you can always go back and adjust it. But I'm just going to do this in sections. I'm not going to make a big deal about it. Maybe I'll do a little bit in here. And this is just the very tops of these trees. So you might not even need that, but I want to show a little bit of depth and height and sort of thing. So that's the only real way to kind of show a difference, is to click around and make these little points so that when you're working with Fantasy Grounds, you're able to use these maps effectively, but also show off its quality. So that's something you want to keep in mind. So again, I'm going to do this area back here. This is just another little area where there's some thicker trees and bushes. And like I said, I'm not going right up to the very edge. I just want to kind of show there's a little bit of shadow in here without covering everything up. So just kind of doing these corners. Really have to do anything spectacular. Not following a color by number thing. I mean, this is just me just clicking around and kind of having fun and not even stressing about stuff. A lot of people, when they start using this tool, they just get really stressed out. Get that it's supposed to be make-believe and fun, and it's not really supposed to be a stressful thing. The only time you really stress is maybe if you're getting ready to run a campaign and you haven't done your homework. That's kind of on you anyway. So taking that out on the tool or on the platform is probably your own doing. So can't help you with that. That's a self-discipline thing. So there we go. So there's just a little bit of line of sight type, occluders around the edges where the trees are. I've quarantined off some of these little trees and mushrooms. Kind of looking around to see if there's anything else that I want to put this on. It doesn't really look like there's too much else. Oops. I accidentally double-clicked when I should have single-clicked. So there we go. Okay, so these little mushrooms down here are probably not tall enough where the person can walk up and they can see over the top. So I'm not going to even mess with those. All right, so when you're done placing your line of sight, what you want to do is check it on each stage. So if I right click and go to view, and I'm going to zoom to fit, and in the map tools itself, you go to play mode, which is the default mode, And we're going to turn on the line of sight, and we're going to enable lighting, because right now there's no lighting because there's dark out. So I want to go to the lighting tool, and I want to change the time of day. So I'm going to go to the ambient lighting. Right now it's set to nighttime, or this black color. So I want to change it to, let's go with sunlight. So you can see the map brightens up. And it is on or active at this point. And at this point, you can change the direction of the shadow. So this is what I was telling you about earlier. So where the occluders were, you can change the direction and the length of the shadow. So if I leave this at 280, that's roughly going straight down with the shadows that are already here. And then I can lengthen the shadow a little to kind of match the length of the original shadow. So that's all I've done, is I just lengthened the shadow to about 10, which is a pretty good number for this. Maybe you would go to 12 or something, but make them too long. It's cast too large of a shadow. So let's go with 12. That's a good number. Yeah, and it kind of follows the pattern of the shadows that's already there. So that's how you change the direction of the sun and the time of the year and that sort of thing. So if it was winter, you can probably double the length. And that's it. That's really how simple that is. And when I get a player on here, we'll be able to see better. So let's check that out. One of the things you want to do when you're working with line of sight is make sure that you have at least one NPC or one player on the combat tracker. So I have something called Party Token. I'm just using this, and it has a torchlight on it. So I'm going to take the torch. I might leave it on for now. So I'm going to drag and drop this onto the map. And what you want to look for is, how well does it come across. So right now, here's the token. And hard to see because it's blending in. And then I want to unlock this and go to play mode, and I'm going to turn on the player vision. And this is basically what the player will see. So they will, when they see these areas here, it'll be a shadow, and these areas are closed. They won't see all the way up on top. So that's the difference, is that you can toggle between the GM view and the player view. Now, if I want to change it to nighttime, it's going to become a little bit more evident. So maybe I'll go with dusk. So I'm going to change it to lighting, back to there. The behavior, I'll leave that. Presets, I'll leave that. I want to go to the ambient lighting and drop this down. Hello, drop down. It's like it froze or something. Okay. All right, so go to dusk, and that changes the background color. And when you take possession of the token, that's basically what you're going to see. So these are the shadows that are cast from the line of sight that I had put on here. So that's what's basically going to look like for players. For the game master, if you turn that off, you're still going to see like a hybrid view of the lighting that's being cast. And that's because they have a torch right now. So if I take the torch and remove that from the player, so if I go to the effects area and I remove that, when you have this token, you're not going to see much as a player. So if I turn this back into the player mode, that's basically what it looks like without the torch. So that's just a kind of a way to illustrate and show what's happening here. And then when you come up close to an object, like let's say you're going to climb on top, you open this up and then you can see behind it. So it kind of just blocks light. So that's all you're doing here. Just checking to see if the lighting's working properly and if it's interacting with what you've done. So that's that. I'm going to actually get out of this mode, go back to standard mode here. I'm going to actually take this token off. I don't want it influencing me or bothering me. Okay, so that's that. Now I'm going to go back in and put a little bit of reflection for the water. I'm not going to do it on every little square inch, just on these areas that have the shiny, kind of the shiny appearance. So what that's going to mean is I'm going to have to put a mask on here that's going to distort the image, which is the water effect. So if I go to the effects tool and I use the drop down and go to water, what happens is the whole map is affected. So that's something that you have to get used to on some of this masking and unmasking. So for the time being, I'm going to enable the mask. I'm going to change the blur to at least 25%. That's a good happy medium. So when you make the lines for the, to make the water effect, you want it to kind of come through. And since these aren't perfect squares, I'm going to need to hold down the Alt key. And I'm just going to draw around the areas that I want to show the water effect. You don't need to go right up to the edge, just kind of have a little bit of an area. And as you can see, it kind of makes this move. And I'm going to come over here and do the same thing. So I'm just going to systematically go through here and make little patches of reflective water. That's all I'm going to do. Nothing serious or nothing too crazy or perfect. It's just going to give you the impression that there's some deeper water here, and that the sun or the lighting is reflecting off. Like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect. It kind of just gives you the illusion that there's light and movement. That's exactly what you want to do. So it's really not going to be perfect. And the reason I put that blend on here is so you won't see the line between this and the things that aren't actually using that. So again, I'll just kind of come back here. And if you zoom in close enough, you can kind of see a line here. So that's where this blur tool comes in. It actually blurs the edges. You don't have to worry about being too noticeable. So again, I'm holding down the Alt key and just kind of tracing around so I can get this area. Yeah? Okay, just leave it there, please. So anyways, this is just a way to embellish the map a little, make it a little bit more interesting and fun. Going to continue to do some of this water work here. So again, holding down the Alt key and just kind of tracing around the periphery of these things. Very basic and simple, no stress. And it's not perfect. I'm not looking for perfection. I'm really looking for just an effect that when my players are on the map, they're going to see some of this water come through. And that's all I'm trying to do. I just want to give them the illusion that there's some water here, that it's wet, and it's not just an inch deep. Some of these places might be up to 4 or 5 feet deep, so, or a couple meters anyways. And then a little bit up here. So there we go. So really, it's almost done. I don't think there's anything else I need to do. This might be a large tree, so I might put something like that over this. So let me do that. So I'm going to go back to the line of sight tool, and I'm already in the terrain tool. Hold down and go to the line tool and just click around the edges here. There we go. And if you get too close to the edge or you want to adjust it, you can always come back and move points. And make sure you're in the selection mode. And just move these accordingly. So if you think you need it to adjust a little bit, you can. So that should be pretty good. I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect. So that's pretty much it. I mean, that was a very simple map. I like that. I don't want to have to spend hours and hours on these things. I think that will give the impression that I'm looking for, and it will make it fun so they can still see what's going on. So let's check it out. Let's look at the play mode. Let's turn on the line of sight back on. So this is dawn, basically. So I want to go back to the nighttime. Let's see what nighttime looks like. So if I go to the ambient lighting, which is the sunlight here, and I change this to moonlight, it's pretty dark. So it's hard to see without any light source. So a lot of people have infravision or dark vision, but so I'm going to put the token back on here. And then go back to play mode. When I select the token, that's basically what they're seeing in the moonlight. And if you come up close enough to the water, and if you're able to zoom in, you can see a little bit of movement. But in the daytime, you're going to see a lot more detail. So we think that this encounter will happen any time other than nighttime, because nighttime kind of washes out the whole map. So I'm going to try to make it a point that they arrive here during the day, or at least the morning or the late afternoon. So I'll go to the lighting tool and switch this back to sunlight. So that way they can actually see what's going on. So there we go. So the Mothman is going to be over here where the where this big tree is. So they go up, they'll be talking to him. He's actually hanging on a branch underneath, so, or he might be under one of these mushrooms. So that's what I got. So that's a real simple, basic thing that you can do with maps. Like I said, you don't have to get all weird and crazy about it. There's no point and no reason for that. And you see, I didn't cover this whole entire mushroom because the edge of this might be visible if you stand far enough back. And on top of that, it's kind of rounded, so you don't always have to go around the very edge. And these trees, same thing. When you open these up, it takes that in consideration. So that if you climbed up here on top, then you would see through it. It wouldn't be a big deal. So that's basically it for today. This is part 3. I've done a couple other of these, so if you guys want to go look at some of the other ones that are a little bit more complex, you can. Just kind of want to get people used to the idea of using the tool and not getting frustrated. So that's basically what I'm doing here. Kind of sharing some of my art, or at least some of the work I'm doing. So again, this map was made by Mopsy. He's a photographer that hangs out in our college. We have a lot of other people too that are very talented. The world map that I made was made by Tom Cardo, so I was able to get a commission out of him before he got too busy and popular. And then there is some tokens that were made by Bernardo Hasselman. So in my assets folder, if I go to tokens and I double click on the campaigns or single click, these are some of the tokens that were made for this campaign. So it's going to be really cool. Looking forward to running this. So these are just some of the main NPCs in the campaign, and then there's some maps. So if I go to the images section and go to campaign, there's some artwork, and then there's the maps. So all the maps that are in the campaign are imported. I think next time I do this, I'm going to do the ant folk colony. This is one of the main maps for that. So this one will be a little bit more challenging because there's a lot of walls and stuff. So this would kind of help with the line of sight. And you don't have to worry so much about ambient light unless you want it to have a glow, which I might do that. I might have like a light green kind of ambient glow or maybe some kind of brownish beige color. I don't know yet. But that's probably what I'll work on next. And then there's the ranger camp, which I will be doing that soon too. So this is an abandoned ranger camp that started off as like a lumber place. You can see there's some trees that have been cut down. This is on the very edge of the Wildwood. And then below here's the Azure Emerald River. So this is going to be the next couple of maps that I work on. And once I have them all done, I'm going to start working on the actual encounters, the adventures, and then placing them and linking everything together. I'm going to go through the whole process. But I'm starting with all the images and maps first, because that's the majority of the work. So anyhow, you guys take care. Happy holidays, and we'll see you around. And I think next week around the same time, it's 7 or so, on the 7th, I'm going to go over the new Strixhaven content. And we also have a contest going on in Fantasy Grounds Academy. If you don't have a standard license and you're looking to start playing, we have a little contest going where we're going to give you a free standard license. And it has to be done through the store. We can't do it through Steam or that sort of thing. So if you want to participate in that, you click on the links in the